Squibb, and Pfizer.
Shakespeare says, "My crown is in my heart, not on my head, not decked with diamonds or Indian jewels. My crown is called content." Now, if Shakespeare says that, imagine what the Bible has to say about contentment. And it's something that we often miss in the hurriness of our world, in the age of anxiety and you name it. The busyness, the crush of the world takes away the greatest gift, one of the greatest gifts of being with Christ, which is contentment. Paul McNulty is back with us. Paul's the president of Grove City College, and he's got a message about the rare jewel of Christian contentment. Paul, welcome to the show.
Thanks, John. It's great to be with you and Kathy again.
So, Paul, this is the thing that we're all looking for, right? This is what we all want, probably more than anything. And yet it seems like our day-to-day choices take us away from it as opposed to toward it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the spirit of our age more and more to kind of center on ourselves and to put ourselves in a position where our psychological health is everything. And if we have that mindset, then we're never going to find contentment because, we have to follow the path of Christ. And it was a path of suffering before he was raised and to find contentment in every circumstance. But let me set the stage for you. Here at Grove City, on Fridays now, we have what we call Formation Friday. And at 11 o'clock, we stop classes and students get to pick from more than a dozen different breakout groups to sit down with a professor and read a book together.
Nice.
And so we just started that this semester. And so I jumped right in because I wanted to do it. And so I picked The Rare Jewel of Christian Contentment by Jeremiah Burroughs. And I had a group of 30, including Katie Rose, Kathy's daughter, and who took diligent notes the whole time. So she's going to be an expert on the subject. And we had 5 weeks of talking about this book. And I got to tell you, it's such a privilege to be able to work with students who really have an opportunity now to kind of get these truths into their hearts and talk about, the road ahead for them is going to be up and down, filled with, as Paul says in Philippians, plenty and want. And Paul says, Philippians 4:11, I have learned the secret of being content. And so it takes time to learn it. And there's a bit of a mystery, an art to understanding contentment. That's what makes it so interesting. And Burroughs preached 9 sermons on the subject in the middle of the Civil War in England. And we went through a translation of those sermons to dig in deeper on the subject.
So, Paul, is it too simplistic to say, so what's the key? What's the secret?
No, it's not. But like any secret, any key, it takes time to really let it settle into the heart. But I think there were some things that really stand out. I think, first of all, we have to understand the idea that in Christ, everything is transformed. And so what is a hardship for another person, someone apart from God, that in our lives, hardships are actually blessings. And that's so difficult for us to accept. But, it's just unmistakable. Death, where is thy sting? Everything is transformed. And so that's certainly key, to see those difficult moments, whatever they might be, and find contentment there, to know that God is redeeming them, he's using them. In fact, those are the best times for us to actually grow. And that if we always had a smooth way, and I borrow from Charles Spurgeon in this class, who says if we always had a smooth way, we should be alarmed because God's not doing work in us during those times. So I think that's one thing. I think following the model of Christ is another, that if God loved his son enough to let him suffer before he's glorified, then certainly his love for us doesn't mean he's abandoned us. In getting the idea that contentment is godly self-sufficiency, it means more about what substituting rather than adding. Students would think, well, if only I had this, or if only I had that, I'll be content. Of course, that's us too. But what contentment says is, I don't need anything else ultimately. All I need is Christ. And that if I don't have, by subtracting, I learn what the secret of contentment is all about.
Paul, that's so counterintuitive to the world, isn't it?
Absolutely. It's always grabbing for more, looking for that thing that will do the trick. And just suffering through the circumstances, not finding contentment in them, but suffering through them until I can finally get that thing I need, that thing I want. And Burroughs was just, laying this out for a 17th century audience that was fearful of its life, and also, economic circumstances could change quickly, and he's pleading with them to learn the secret, to remain content in the changing and unknown circumstances.
And it's not to say that being content is not wanting to have ambition to try to push yourself.
That's was actually going to be my question, because Paul, I've talked to my daughter about this, and she's loved being a part of that group so much. And I think you're hitting students when they're most, maybe in their whole life, tempted by what can be.
The world.
Right.
And all that's in it.
Yeah. And that's one of the things Burroughs points out. It's not about not being mindful of your circumstances. In fact, if you're not aware of them, then how can you be truly content? So it's being mindful of what you're going through. But it's getting to the question of what it takes to be satisfied in the Lord. And does it take something external to you, or is it truly something internal? Here's, by the way, one of the most exciting things that we were discovering. Burroughs makes the point that contentment, Christian contentment, is one of God's most glorious works. He says that, compared to the sun and the moon, that contentment is a more glorious work, and that it's actually better in certain sense than even the angels in heaven, because they have nothing to tempt them, nothing to give them dis-ease, to make them upset, where we face all those things. And so if we, by grace, can have contentment, in that we exceed the glorious beings and their contentment, and again, to overcome the flesh and to have that peace is a truly remarkable thing. Mm-hmm. And so it gives a sense of, okay, that's inspiring for me. I'm going to pursue a life of contentment. That's what we were trying to develop in this group, and the students seem to respond real nicely to it.
Fabulous.
Paul McNulty is the 9th president of Grove City College. We're talking to him about the rare jewel of contentment. And it is rare, right? Especially in our culture. I think back on my grandparents, both sets of grandparents that I was privileged to have in my life. My dad's parents passed away when I was in 2nd grade, both of them. And so I didn't know them for very long, but they were both Polish immigrants, and they lived in a really small house. And my grandmother, as a lot of Eastern European women were known to do, could crank out, dozens of pierogies from a kitchen that was like 4 foot by 4 foot with no counter space, in a tiny oven and a little, what she called an ice box, right? But I do remember just a feeling of contentment being there. And when I look back, knowing what our lives are like now, I think they hardly had anything.
Yeah, Burroughs has an interesting take on prosperity, too. We talked about the fact that he warns listeners about the burden of prosperity, the temptations associated with it, the burdens of caring for things, right? And haven't we all experienced that sense of we get to a point of comfort and blessings of that sort materially. We don't find ourselves to be happier really by it, and there's a certain responsibility that we feel, and I think what you're putting your finger on, Kathy, is that there's a certain freedom that comes from that simpler that circumstance, and again, it's not wrong to aspire,
right?
But it's realizing that whatever kind of unfolds, that's not going to define what I'm really looking for in life.
Yes,
that piece of heart.
So, in the age of never enough, contentment, if we can find it, and Paul, it sounds like what you're doing at Grove City, you're teaching this and leaning into that. What a great gift to have that so early in life. Yeah,
I just think about that very point again about the ups and downs on the road ahead. And, when you work in a college community of this sort, you really just love the students and you just want the best for them. And when they go off, you think about the directions they're going to go. And it's such a privilege to be able to just give them a little heads up that it's going to get tougher, but when it does, that is not going to define how your heart will be. And you have everything available to you to be content as those circumstances change.
It's a good word for Friday.
By the way, it's very convicting for me as I was preparing this, because I would be reading something and think, oh, great, Paul. Well, how do you feel right now yourself? Okay, not so content, huh?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. No, I get that.
Yeah.
I get that.
Yeah.
Paul, on yesterday's show, our good friend Bruce Bickle was on with us, and we've known Bruce for a long time. He's a teacher, a pastoral voice in the Pittsburgh region, has been for a long time, also a voice in the financial sector in the city of Pittsburgh. And he was a Vietnam vet, and as a result of his exposure to Agent Orange, now suffers from Parkinson's disease. And so when he was on the air with us yesterday, John said, Bruce, tell us about your health. Your retirement hasn't been what you expected it would be. And Bruce said, no, it hasn't, but it's what I've been given.
Ah, boy, what a beautiful thing.
And, just that, I wrote that down after the show yesterday, but it's what I've been given. And, knowing Bruce as long as we have, I know his heart, and I know how much he welcomes what God gives to him. Right. It was really, I don't want to. Yeah, it was convicting. And when people say inspiring, I feel like it's become kind of cliche, but in its truest sense, that's what I got from what Bruce said yesterday.
Yeah, inspiring is actually, the word means to fill you with spirit, and God breathes on us to bring us life. And so an inspiring word, it gives us life. And and it's interesting when you see great saints of that sort go through difficulty.
Yes.
You can be tempted to think, oh, has God left them, abandoned them? I mean, here's somebody who deserves to have such a great retirement life after all that he has done. And what Burroughs and others want us to see is, oh no, God's love is actually being played out in that person's life. And we'll see this someday in eternity, how this whole deal was organized. And it's so hard for us to understand now, but it's definitely not an abandonment. It's definitely, a way in which he's working in us. I've told you the story before that my son died at age 26 of cancer, right, a year before I became president of Grove City College. At the time it happened, I didn't even think that a year later I'd be called to love 2,000 students who are basically the same age as my son. And the Lord was preparing me for that work through the agony of his loss, knowing, of course, comforts in my son's faith gave me a great hope.
Fabulous. Well, Paul,
we appreciate you so much, Paul.
Sure do.
You and Brenda.
Yeah, your heart and your leadership and the skill that you combine in loving the students. It's a rare and wonderful thing. So thanks for your friendship and for your time here.
Oh, it's always such a pleasure to talk to both of you. And we're going to see Katie Rose sing coming up this next week.
Terrific.
As the chapel choir. In fact, we're going to go to New Hope, Pennsylvania tomorrow and hear her sing on Sunday. So it's going to be our spring break, and it'll be a real joy.
Oh, that's wonderful. Paul, our very best to you. We pray for you all the time. We never forget.
We surely do. Well, there's a harbinger of spring right there. I mean, the robin first coming in, spring break at college campuses. It's going to make us feel really good. Spring break at Grove City. Take a quick break, come back. Weekend Reviews right down the road.